Hi everyone, Ashley here and welcome to another video on my YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be building a slider card in this fun winter scene. It's early for Christmas in the real world, but in the card making world I feel like Christmas is here with all of the new fun stamp sets that have come out, and I've been having a lot of fun playing with this Yeti or Not stamp set made by Lawn Fawn. This was released in their latest fall-winter release. This is actually the third card and second video that I'm posting using this set, and if you're interested in seeing the other two cards that are together in one video, click on that link in the top right of your screen right now. So the first step for this card is to stamp out all the images. I'm doing that on Neenah Solar White cardstock, which is just a really nice cardstock for Copic coloring, which is the coloring medium I'm planning to use. I've got my Gina K Amalgam ink in the top right there, and that's what I'll use to stamp out these images. So I'm speeding up the video now so you can see me just placing all the images onto the paper. In addition to the Yeti or Not stamp set, I'm also using a couple clouds from the Butterfly Kisses stamp set and a couple little animals from the Say What Christmas Critters set. That's the little deer and the little llama. And I'm just holding the paper down with that bar magnet, and then I'll pick up the images with the left side of the MISTI there. This tends to be the first step in almost all the cards I make, where I just stamp out a bunch of images first, images that I think I'll use on the card, and color them, and then I assemble the whole card together after. I don't always use all of the images that I color in every single card, and you'll see in this one I don't end up using that deer, but what I do is then I color them and I keep them in a little bowl so that I can use them on other cards, and sometimes it makes other cards go easier and faster because the images are already colored, cut, and ready to go. So I just stamped out the images there, and I usually have to stamp them a few times to get a nice clean image, and now I'm going to start with the Copic coloring process. I've been using Copic markers to color images for a lot of cards lately. They've sort of become my favorite coloring medium. If you want to check out another video showcasing my Copic coloring, click on that second link up in the top right corner of your screen now. So for the Yetis, I'm just going around the edges and coloring them in with a warm gray marker, the lightest one that I have. And then I'm just filling in their little faces with a slightly darker warm gray. I love coloring those Yetis because they are just so easy to color. You only need one color and you don't even have to do much blending. I'm now moving on to the Christmas trees, and for these I'm just using a couple of the green colors. I believe the darker is G07 and the lighter is G02. For most of my Copic coloring I use a very similar technique. I take the darkest color first, and then I blend it out with the lighter color. I then like to go back in with the darker color to just add some extra oomph to those shadows. You don't even really have to worry about blending this in too much because having it unblended just adds to the distinction of the shadows. For the Santa hat, I just used a couple nice bright Christmassy reds, and for the clouds, just a touch of light blue. On the llama, I'm using a couple of the same warm gray tones that I used on the Yetis, but just making the bodies darker and the face lighter. I also used a nice light yellow for the llama's scarf, and for the Yeti scarf, a couple of BG tones. For the deer, I'm using two different brown shades. The darker one is E15 and the lighter one is E13. And you can see that E13 marker looks a little bit different. It's just a different type of Copic marker, but they all have the same ink in them. So it doesn't really matter if you get the chows, which are the round ones, or the typical Copics, which are the square ones. It's all the same ink. So now I'm just going around and adding color to the rest of the little images, using an assortment of different bright colors like yellows and reds to color in the presents. For all of them, I'm doing the same thing where I use the darker on the bottom and blend it out with the lighter on top. And you'll notice that the one thing I did forget to color was the little lights on the tree, but I will go back and fill those in by the end of the card. Last thing is that Yeti's cute little popsicle. So now it's time to cut out these images. And luckily I did manage to buy the coordinating dies for this set, which is just a nice added convenience, which I don't do that often. So I'm using some purple tape to adhere the dies to the outside of the images. These dies are super tight to the images, so sometimes it's hard to see. So you really have to get your head right over top and make sure that you're aligning the die perfectly around the image, and then the tape will just keep it nicely in place. So I taped them all down, and now I'm just sliding them through my die cutting machine. Once they arrive on the other side, I can then pull that top plate off and pop out the images. And you can see here that the Yeti is nicely cut out, which is awesome. So now it's time to assemble my card. I've got all the elements here and I've already die cut some of them, but I'll show you which dies I used. So for the card base, I'm using Neenah Solar White in 110 pounds, which is a little bit thicker, nice for a card base. The background border is going to be that Lawn Fawn Perfectly Plaid Winter, which is a really nice pretty blue. For the sky, I'm using more Lawn Fawn pattern paper. This one is Spiffy Speckles with that nice light blue speckled pattern in the background that kind of looks like snow. And for the two hills, I'm using two different colors of glitter paper. The silver one actually comes from a DCWV pattern paper pack called Solid Silvers, and it's a really chunky silver glitter, and it's really beautiful. I cut both hills out with those Lawn Fawn stitched hillside border dies, and I already cut a slider channel in the front one with that slider die you see there, which is from a My Favorite Things set. That front paper, by the way, is cut from some Stampin Up Dazzling Diamonds glitter paper, but any white or silver glitter paper would work the same way for this. In fact, any combination of pattern paper would be different and unique to use. So I'm just gluing down the layers with my liquid glue. I'm using Tombow Mono Multi Glue, which is sort of my go-to glue that I've used for a long time. You can see that I've used it a lot because the bottle is almost empty, but I managed to shake it out and then I can place the layer down on the card base. The great thing about using liquid glue is that you're not stuck. You can put it down and then wiggle it around until it's perfect. That works really well for me because I tend to not get it right on the first try, and it's good to be able to wiggle it. So I'm now putting the sky layer down right on top of that border, so you get that nice pattern paper peeking through in the back. So now I'm adhering that silvery layer in the same way, and you can kind of get a glimpse of that nice chunky glitter there in the light, and I'll try to show you a better image of that later in the video. So there you can see the nice glitter that you get. So now it's time to assemble the slider mechanism. I'm using a dime for this slider. Like I said in my last video, in Canada we actually don't have pennies anymore, which is what most people use for sliders, so I just use a dime. We actually just don't even have them in circulation, and what happens is if you go to the grocery store and something comes to some intermediate of fives, they just round it up or down if you're paying cash. So I'm using foam tape to adhere a slider channel on the back of this piece. So I'm just cutting down some foam to make it thin enough that it will lift up the hillside while also still allowing the dime to have space to move. I'm using some double-sided tape to adhere the foam to the piece. And this foam is actually just cut from Fun Foam, which comes in big sheets, and honestly it comes in a pack that lasts forever because you only use little bits of it for each card, and these bits that I have here are just scraps from other cards. So whenever I have leftover pieces from other cards, I keep them, and they're perfect for applications like this where you actually need little thin pieces. So I'm just taping down that bottom piece now, and making sure that it's straight so that the dime has a nice straight edge to roll along. I've gone ahead and done the same thing around all the edges of this piece, and then adhered more double-sided tape to the back so that it can stick down onto that glittery surface. I then put the dime on the card so that it will be inside the slider channel when I stick down the hill. And I'm making sure to line everything up so that the glittery hill lines up with the hillside behind and makes it look as if it's all one big scene. And once I'm done lining it up, I can stick it down, and then you can see that the dime slides back and forth in its little channel. And you can see again that beautiful glitter in the silver layer. So now it's time to assemble all of the elements onto the card. I played around with how I wanted to lay them all out and kind of set them in place temporarily on the card. So you can see on that left side there I have the little party with the squirrels and the llama around the Christmas tree, and then the Yeti will be dragging the toboggan with the penguin on it to the right. And he's got his little popsicle in his hand, which I think is just so adorable. So how I'm adhering most of these pieces to the card is a combination of glue and double-sided tape. The double-sided tape is meant for the portions of the images that are going to be sticking onto the glitter, because I find that liquid glue just does not adhere very well to glitter, just does not hold on to it for some reason. But for any of the parts of the images that are sticking onto that speckled background, which is just regular paper, I can use my Tim Holtz Multi-Medium Matte, which is just a really nice liquid glue, very adhesive, but also kind of see-through because of the mattness. So I do the same thing for each image, and I've just skipped ahead here, and you can see me adhering the final image on that last squirrel. And now everything is adhered using a combination of tape and glue. And there goes that dime again, making sure it still works. So I decided that I wanted to add a fun sparkly touch to this card using Lawn Fawn Chunky Glitter. And you can see in the tub here that it comes in, it's this beautiful iridescent glitter. It almost has like a rainbow effect in how it sparkles. It's just so pretty. So how I like to adhere this to elements is I'll take my glue, I'm using the same liquid glue as before, and just sort of smushing it over the surface that I want the glitter to be on. So you sort of just use the tip of the bottle to smush out the glue and make sure that it covers the whole surface. And I'm putting it here on that rim of the Yeti's hat, and I believe also on the little ball at the end there to make it kind of look sparkly and fluffy. Once I've covered it with glue, I can then put my image onto this paper, which is just meant to catch any excess glitter. And you can see there that I had labeled it, so I just reuse this paper every time I use the glitter. And then you just pour the glitter right on. So you'll see that there's a lot on the Yeti, but the only parts that will stick on are the parts that had glue on it. So once you tap off all the excess, you get this cute Yeti with his little sparkly hat. So I'm going to actually go ahead and do the same thing for the penguin, and you can see the effect there. So I got a sparkly penguin and a sparkly Yeti. So now it's time to assemble the slider. And I knew I wanted the penguin on the toboggan to slide along, but I wanted him to be pulled along by the Yeti with some nice twine. So I've gone ahead and pre-tied a bow in this peppermint lawn trimmings from Lawn Fawn, and I just did that off camera because it took me forever. And I wanted to make it nice and tiny so it didn't overpower the card or the images. And I'm just applying a piece of double-sided tape onto the edge of that toboggan where I want the bow to stick, and now I'm sticking it down. I've tried a few different techniques, and I find that double-sided tape is the easiest and best way to stick twine bows onto things. It holds it really well, and I find with liquid glue it tends not to stick very nicely. So if you're having trouble attaching your bows to things, give double-sided tape a try. I then knew I wanted the other side of the tape to be held in the Yeti's hand. So I adhered it to the Yeti in the same way, where I put some double-sided tape on the back of his hand, and then just stuck the twine onto it in the position that I wanted. So I'm kind of just testing here where I want the position to be, where I want him to be standing, and then I will stick the twine just onto the back of his hand and cut off the extra, so it's not coming out of the other side, which you'll just see in a moment. And this way it looks like the Yeti is dragging the penguin along on his toboggan with that nice twine. To add the penguin to the slider element, I'm using these My Favorite Things slider elements, which is just a little pack of basically 3D dimensional pieces that you can use to add to your dime or your penny within your slider. And this just sticks out of the slider channel and gives you something to stick your element onto or your stamped image onto, in this case the penguin. So I added some double-sided tape, and that's how I'm going to adhere it to the dime. And then off camera I'm going to add some double-sided tape to the top of that slider element as well, so that I can go ahead and stick the penguin onto it. So I'm just putting that Yeti in place. I actually used some foam squares on the back of him so that he's also popped up, just like the hillside beneath him. And I used some double-sided tape on his feet to make sure they're stuck down too. And now I'm going to stick the penguin down onto that slider element, again using more double-sided tape. I find double-sided tape is almost just the best adhesive for almost anything. It really sticks to everything. So if you're ever wondering what kind of adhesive you should use for something, double-sided tape might be your answer. So here I am just adhering the penguin to his little slider. The last stage of this card is now to adhere down the sentiment strip. I actually stamped and embossed this off camera, but it's a sentiment from that same stamp set, the Yeti or Not stamp set, and it says Yeti Set Go, which I think is just perfect for the little penguin tobogganing down the hill. I'm using some liquid glue here because it's on that plain pattern background, and I can adhere a couple clouds in that little red banner. And I think that red just adds a nice pop of color to bring out the color of the hats and sort of contrast with the blue background. So there you have the card for today. You can see how the penguin slides in his little channel, and of course my cat had to make one guest appearance in my video. So I hope that you enjoyed watching today's video, and I hope that you found some of the techniques that I presented today informative, and I hope that they'll help you in your card making as well. So thanks for watching, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye!